Hi, I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater, and I am joined today by very special guests. We have John and Kevin Suhr with us. Great to see you guys.
Thank you very much for having us.
We're super excited to have Suhr Guitars as part of the Sweetwater family. As I mentioned, you were going to come up before when we had first started working with you guys. And so now we're excited to be able to sit down with you in person and do this. And we've got a couple of guitars that we're going to talk about here today. So we'll have some fun.
Great.
Looking back on the story, John, do I understand correctly that you actually started making guitars for yourself because you were a player seeking tone?
Yeah, I was frustrated, and I think maybe I kind of vented on my guitar, being the fact that my inadequacies in playing. I was like, oh, that's because the action's not right, the frets are not right, it's not in tune, and so I just kind of got frustrated. Plus, when I grew up, there was no other way. You went to a store, you bought a guitar, and you took it to a repair guy and had it fixed. So I had some really bad experiences with repair guys in my youth, and I started to get involved in fixing it myself. And I was always a take it apart and fix it kind of guy.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to be a rock star. I didn't want to do this, actually.
Well, it worked out pretty well because the guitars are fantastic. Did you have someone guide you, or were you teaching yourself, or how did you learn the woodworking and all of the components of the guitar making process?
Yeah, again, back then, obviously we didn't have any internet, we didn't have any really good materials, any good ways of learning things, but I had a Strat that I liked, but I hated the neck, and so I found this guy, Bob Benedetto, who most people know. He's a brilliant jazz box builder, and he lived in Pennsylvania. So I went to see him, and I said, can you make me a neck? And he says, sure, you draw the headstock, and I'll make it. So I got so excited about the process, I said, well, can I apprentice with you? And he said, he goes, number one, don't do this. He goes, you don't want to do this. And he goes, number two, I'll let you watch me make your neck.
Huh.
So that was really kind of my intro to that whole thing. And maybe it was the fact he said, you don't want to do this. This is not a great way to spend your life.
Right.
I think it kind of pushed me to do it.
Well, I remember the first time that you came to my attention was with the guitar that you made for Mark Knopfler. So how did you make the leap from your first projects to that?
Yeah, that was many years later, and I was also a cook in New York. And funny enough, I had to fire a guy in the restaurant for making a bad sandwich for the boss. And I was doing repairs, but I was mostly playing in bands and playing a club gig and cooking. So I'd drive to Jersey, play, and come back to New York to cook. And so he got a job at Rudy's Music Stop. And Rudy was looking for a repair guy. He really had nothing going on. And so Rudy gave me a chance, and we kind of gradually built up into multiple floors. And
Right.
so it was all because of a roast beef sandwich.
And that's why I say my existence actually boils down to that roast beef sandwich, because that's the same street he met my mom at. So
Oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah, actually,
That's kind of a joke.
when I worked on 48th Street, my wife worked on 48th Street too in a restaurant, and that's how I met her.
Right, so it all goes back to sandwiches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me being here, that sandwich.
And making a guitar is like being a cook too.
Yeah, sure. A little bit of this, a little bit of seasoning, a little spices.
Everything matters.
Right. Now, you also then made the leap to working on amplifiers and getting into that side of things.
Yeah, that's kind of a long story, but the short story is that I bought a Bradshaw switcher because I was really into Lukather and Landau and all the studio greats. And so Bob Bradshaw had the ultimate switching system, and so I got the same one that Lukather had. But I couldn't afford to have Bradshaw actually put it together. So he recommended all the amplifiers and preamps I should get, and I loved the rig, but I didn't like the core tones. So I just started taking apart amps and going to the library and studying and getting all tech books, because again, we didn't have the internet to help you. And it was just kind of, you had to figure it out yourself, and I was constantly taking apart things and modding and...
Right. Always that pursuit of tone and performance.
Yeah. And unfortunately and unfortunately, I think I put too much emphasis on the tone and the playability, which kind of drove me into this, to being that guy who built that stuff.
Right.
So I should have spent more time playing, but I don't know. Maybe it turned out well in the end.
It worked out, yeah. Right. So you moved on to your own company, building guitars for yourself, so you could really have control over what was happening and really be sure of the outcome?
Yeah, I spent time at Fender as a senior master builder, and after Bradshaw, because I wound up working with Bob Bradshaw after I designed an amplifier. So Bob said basically, well, what are you playing if you're not playing these amplifiers? And I said, well, I modded some Marshalls. And he said, well, if I send you one, would you mod it for me? And I said, sure. So he called me back and he goes, Lukather really likes this amp, and a lot of people like this amp. What do you think about making a 3-channel preamp? And I said, sure, I'll give it a go. And I did that, and it wound up being Van Halen wound up using it on one of FUCK album, and everybody liked it. And so Bradshaw and I decided we were going to do a partnership on this preamp. He called me back and said, yeah, I've got like 200 orders here
Wow.
at $1,800 a piece, and he goes, I need help. So you're gonna have to move out here.
Right.
So we kind of 6 months later, we packed our bags and came out to California in
Made the leap.
91.
So what year was the founding of actually Suhr Guitars?
97, we started this factory. And in between, so I worked about 3 years for Bradshaw, with Bradshaw as custom audio amplifiers. And then I went to Fender as a senior master builder.
Okay. Then in 97.
And then 97, I left Fender and started the company.
Okay. Did you have, in those early years, did you have a specific model? You're like, I'm going to launch this company and this is going to be the guitar I'm going to make? Or were you making mostly custom instruments? Or how did you get started?
It was mostly my standard body, which is basically what Knopfler's guitar was, the outside perimeter shape. We started there, and then we kind of moved into the California Classic and the T styles and things like that. Just, I'm really, sometimes I get accused of being not innovative, oh, it's just a copy guitar, but it's really, to me, it's about making a better mousetrap. So I would go, well, the playability of these guitars isn't right. I didn't like a narrow neck with wide string spacing. Your strings are falling off the edge. And back then, we really didn't have too many options. So you really had to you couldn't take a pre-CBS Strat and have a wider neck. The neck is what it is.
Right.
So that, and also things like, hum from single coils, tunability, really accurate fret placement, CNC where every fret slot is cut one at a time on a machine that'll cut engine blocks. So to me, it's about fixing the problems that a musician commonly sees that frustrate them while they're playing, and that takes away from playing. So you become obsessed, like, oh no, it's like it's not in tune. I would find out very early that some people were putting the nuts in the wrong place, and that just throws everything out of whack. So for me, it was just about fixing problems for myself. I really wasn't concerned about trying to do, a guitar factory. It just kind of happened.
I think it's such an important facet of what you do that both you guys are players. And when Andy Wood was here, we were talking about that really what you make are player guitars. They're really designed for somebody to be able to make music with them and not have to worry about the instrument.
Yeah, I remember, I'll always remember Steve Stevens was one of my customers back then, and he gave me a really big compliment once, and it was basically that he could take the guitar out of my shop and go right to stage. And didn't have to worry that something was not going to be right or in tune. We've
found that every guitar that we've pulled out of the box that's arrived here has been ready to play right out of the box. I mean, there's no tweaking, barely tuning even.
Yeah, that's awesome.
When I pulled this one out, I think it was in tune when I pulled it out. Which is just fantastic. So Kevin, how did you start working at the company?
I started when I was actually kind of early on in high school. I was 12, 13. I would work summers sometimes sanding necks and detailing them, trying to save some money for some of the other hobbies I had, like buying a camera or something.
Sure.
And then I went to college and I did electrical engineering because there's not really a guitar making degree in the UC system. So I did electrical engineering because we make amps, we make pedals, electronic stuff, so that made the most sense for me. And then after graduating there, basically I had like a month or two, and then I went right into work because he didn't want me to forget everything I learned. And
I needed help.
Yeah, he needed help, so I started working there. We had a brilliant engineer there named Bob Walker, who I kind of apprenticed under for a year until he left, and learned some programming from him, some kind of circuit design from him. And just being there where I could just do research at the factory and just kind of work on new designs and stuff was mostly what I did. I started with the pedals first and then kind of branched into a little bit of the amps when we did the PT15 IR. It was kind of a collaboration between him and I. We would share schematics. He was mostly responsible for the tube design, and I was responsible for some of the interface and the digital stuff. And so that's kind of how I started, and I'm always doing new stuff at the factory, though, whether it's like some of the processes behind the scenes of the guitar side, helping with efficiencies. Lately, we were working on drawing necks and stuff, and I'll be working on more guitar stuff too. So I'm always trying to learn new things there and always working on a bunch of different things. I'm never stuck doing one thing at a time, which is nice for me because I like to learn too.
Yeah. Do you take the same approach that John was talking about when you're, say, for example, designing a pedal, the discovery delay or something? That this is the delay that I would like to have. Is that your approach to it, or how are you thinking about it?
Yeah, with that unit,
unfortunately,
that was exactly how I approached it. I was like, let me, because our previous pedals were kind of designed before me, the form factor and everything. So I've been trying to I haven't really designed too many pedals in that form factor, but when it came to this, I was like, let me just do something completely from scratch. I'll do a new chassis, a new enclosure. I wanted the design to look kind of retro and vintage because I love a bunch of vintage gear, analog gear. I had like inspiration boards of all these old pieces of gear. I'm a really big fan of like vintage knobs. So I drew up the knob in CAD and we got it molded and I made everything basically custom. And then it was like, they wanted me to do like some flagship delay pedal because it was like I could either do something more stripped down and then build up to that. But it was like, no, let's just
go all the way
from the start. So it took me a long time because that unit specifically, I had to learn a bunch of stuff electronically, like saving stuff to EEPROM memory and all this digital to analog conversion and doing all the presets, and I had to figure out MIDI and all this stuff. So it did take a while, but in the end, and I pulled my hair out because I had to redesign the board multiple times. It's a big analog project, and it was also a big programming digital thing. Right. Not like digital in terms of audio, but digital like microcontroller programming. So it's like this mixed hybrid thing. But yeah, it was like what you said. It was, what would I want? How would I want it to look? My dream kind of pedal. I want it to be something that like it could sit in my studio and I look at it and be like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Right.
I want it to I want to keep it but also sound good.
Yeah. Well, of course. Yeah.
But he had lofty expectations and ideas for it, so it took him a while to like, maybe I shouldn't have added all these features.
Yeah.
Because everything's programmable.
Everything's programmable, and I have things where like you can map the expression pedal for every preset differently, and every knob can be mapped in any direction. And there's a 7-segment display on there, so you can see the milliseconds and the BPM. And
that was my thing. I was like, I don't remember ever having an analog pedal that had a display on it. And like, if you could make that happen, that'd be really cool.
Yeah, it's really a hybrid.
I don't even know if there's any now.
Yeah,
besides
right,
ours.
Right.
Yeah, and I can even punch in the millisecond down to the millisecond, and it can sync to MIDI clock too. If you have like a DAW that's spitting out MIDI clock, or like a pedal switcher that's sending MIDI clock. There was just like basically I tried to add as much as I can to an analog delay, but yeah, it did take me a while, and there was points where I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna get this to work because I had to really debug the thing so much before the release and trying to patch any glitch or error.
Right.
But I think it's been quite stable.
That's a very cool delay,
and I'm pretty happy about it. That's probably like my best engineering.
Almost as good as your Benson.
Yeah, that was another big inspiration for me, was the Benson Echo Rec. It's a classic old Echo unit that Pink Floyd used in the 60s, and I like spent a bunch of money getting one shipped from Germany that was refurbished, and fell in love with the thing. So some of the qualities that thing had, like the way it regenerates and just can regenerate an echo forever but not get crazy loud or really harsh. It kind of smooths. It's smooth. So I tried to like capture some of that and added that into my circuit, trying to limit the feedback so that it will smooth out and not get crazy, and you can kind of do long swells and fun stuff with your guitar. And with the expression pedal, you can
Yeah.
turn up the regen and kind of like swell into something and just have a crazy wash of sound, and that's the stuff I like. So
Very cool.
yeah, it was a big personal thing, but I'm glad that people really enjoy it too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have a couple of guitars here, and they're sort of the opposite ends of the spectrum for the Suhr line. We've got one that one of our guitar players in merchandising ordered that's your classic, and then we have my guitar here, which is a much more modern kind of take on it. Do you want to grab that one? Let's talk a little bit about these two guitars here. Tell us what the main differences are between a classic and a more modern design in your mind.
Well, this obviously is a classic, California classic shape. But some things that always bug me about that design is like the access up here, where you'd run into the block. So this has a tapered heel, and it's very ergonomic that way. It's easy to get up around, but it's just what I would do if I had, the contours are thin, a little bit thinner here. Like I like an even contour going all around here. So it's just kind of little aesthetic things, but it's the very familiar shape. Just also the necks, I like to go a little wider at the butt of the neck, because one thing that always used to frustrate me about those guitars is that the strings would fall off the edge because you've got a wide string spacing.
Yep.
And then you have a narrow neck. So what I basically did on mine is I made the neck a little bit wider down here, and we use a little bit narrower bridge spacing. I grew up playing Floyd Roses, so this is 2 1/8 inch spacing, which is kind of my go-to on everything we do, including our new bridge. But other than that, there's, like where I look at the, I went through a lot of trouble, being involved in electronics as well. I knew that there was issues like, the humbucker needs a 500K pot, volume pot, otherwise it sounds a little muted and choked. And the single coils, I wanted them to have 250K volume, and they should have an 047, and this should be an 022 cap. So I just, when people started making these 4-pole 5-ways, it gave me a lot of options to do whatever I wanted. So I kind of started going crazy with the switching. Like, okay, so now when you go to the bridge pickup, you do have a humbucker that's a 500K volume, and you've got an 022 cap, and you've got a 500K tone. And then when you go to the single coils, they got 250K tones and 047 caps, and a 250K load on the volume.
Wow.
So so the pickups basically see what they would see if you had 3 single coils, or if you only had humbuckers, what they should see. Also, what I'll do is I'll often put the tone control for the bridge pickup only on the bridge, and as soon as you go here, the other one takes over. Whereas on something like a Strat, when you go into bridge middle, you've got 2 tones working, because they really weren't designed to. They were designed to be 3-way switches, not 5-way. But other than that, it's just things that I would want to do. This is obviously a huge neck.
It's a huge neck. We were kind of
we call this the huge neck. It's 1 inch all the way down, but it's, and also this has got roasted maple on it. So, but other than that, we offer that on everything.
It is a gorgeous guitar, man. Does it play just like a dream? It's just like butter.
Yeah, we go through a lot of trouble on our fretwork. We actually level the fingerboards under string tension so that there's minimal amount of fret is removed. So we're not fixing the neck and the fret. We're making the neck right. We're putting in the frets and just correcting them if it needs it, and then you should be good to go. And we also use vintage style truss rods, because I do think the truss rod makes a huge difference in the tone of the neck. In fact, I think the neck is probably one of the most important sound parts of the guitar, tonal contributors, even maybe more so than the body.
And with a huge neck like that, I mean, this one just rings. That neck is like a bell.
Big necks do sound fat.
Yeah.
I like it a lot.
Fantastic. So then this guitar is very, very different from that.
Yeah, obviously inspired from the T-shape or Telly style guitar. This heel though is our modern heel. It has more access for a different reason, and also that's another thing we do on everything is I have these contours so that you can get in there.
Get your hand up there, right.
So this one, basically, we've got the deep contour, we've got a rounded hole here, and I just decided to go for like no neck plate because I wanted to get rid of some of the meat in front of this heel right here. I still like both of them, and I actually think you have the same amount of access on either one. Some people like this, some people like this. But this was one of our later shapes to do. We had started with the traditional body instead of, like our modern body is where this heel came from.
Okay. And this particular one, this is a chambered mahogany body and a mahogany neck with a walnut top, gorgeous walnut top that you guys picked out for me there. Is absolutely gorgeous.
And also this, with a T-style guitar, and I always thought, well, a lot of people, we want a little tummy contour in there,
Yeah, right.
And the arm contour,
Yep.
and just give it all the comfort.
Right, and this is a very different neck shape than what we have there. It's not a super slim neck, in my opinion, but it's just very comfortable to get your hand wrapped around.
Yeah, is this the is this the even C slim or medium?
I think it's a medium.
Medium,
yeah.
Yeah, there's very little, like there might be 20, 30 thousandths difference in between the shapes. So sometimes if you go, I wish it was just a tad bigger, we've got something that fits that.
Right, and that's an important point to bring up that we're stocking models here at Sweetwater, but pretty much anything with these guitars can be customized.
Yeah.
So you can pick all, I mean, within reason.
There's a lot of options.
Yeah, we don't do a flying V here.
Right.
Yet.
So a lot of options. Locking tuners. Now, tell us about, you have a new bridge. This is a Wilkinson bridge that has a unique locking system on this.
Yeah, that's something that Trevor Wilkinson and I were talking about for many years. In fact, at one point he said, I got this idea and I'll give it to you. And I didn't do anything with it. And like years later, he goes, okay, I made it. But back in the days, in the old days, when I was a heavy Floyd player, I used to find that, the issues with tuning are not in the nut. The issues with tuning are in the bridge. So if you have a properly cut nut with relatively straight string pull and a bridge that has no slippage anywhere, it's like 90% as close to a double locking system. The only main difference, though, is when you dunk the bar, because you're locked here, your strings go slack super quick. Right. Whereas if you don't have a lock here, it behaves more like a traditional trim. So to me, I was like, okay, well, then you don't really need fine tuners. You just need to lock the saddles there. Because basically what happens is when you dunk the bar, the saddle slips underneath the G string and then pulls it back sharp because the G string has low tension sitting on the saddle. So if you were to tune the G higher, it wouldn't slip. So that's one of the main issues is the G string and sometimes the low E, because their tension can slip a little. And the locks take care of that.
Okay.
That's one way of dealing with it.
Right. And these are pretty convenient. I mean, it's not bad to restring. You just pop you loosen the screw and it just pops right in and out. And it doesn't, with Floyd's, you have the fine tuners that you deal with and everything. And then, of course, we do have locking tuners. Actually, both of these have locking tuners, don't they? That would be a non-classic feature on the...
Yeah, definitely. And they're staggered, too. So I don't have a string tree on my guitars because it just improves tuning stability if you don't have one more area of friction.
Yeah, right. Now, you have a wide range of pickups that are available. These are sort of the vintage style, I believe the lowest output ones that you...
They're SSVs?
Yes, they're SSVs, yeah. And that, I think, is a Mateus Asato signature. And
that's also a low output pickup.
Yeah?
Yeah. And so is the Thornbuckers. They're very low, too.
Okay. Is that your preference, or do you tend to look for a higher output pickup, or where the two of you stand on that?
Well, I like higher output pickups because I'm an 80s, I'm an 80s guy.
Right.
70s and 80s, Billy Gibbons, Tres Hombres, and earlier was my hero. Leslie West. The Mountain was just huge to me. So I kind of feel that, but I do want to feel like it's effortless. So like when you hit something, you want it to pop out easy. It really depends on the amplifier. I think so. Every part of the guitar is a meal. I mean, so you can't just change one thing and think it's going to make a major difference. So I just like everything. You just have to consider everything when doing it. Yeah. So I might like a dark pickup if my personal guitar back in the 80s was solid maple. It was quilt maple, but it was a light guitar and had a Floyd Rose in it. So it was on the brighter side. So I had like double screw pickups, which there's 2 rows of screws.
Okay.
And that kind of smooths it out a little bit. And I used a hotter pickup. But, and I was playing through so many different amplifiers. it kind of depends what you're playing through.
Sure.
And these days with modelers, it's kind of hard to decide because you've got so much flexibility in that gear. But if you're playing through a vintage amp, then that's when you really notice, oh, I just went from this model to this model, and I'm hearing a huge difference.
I like having a guitar for each, because I think the first guitar he made me when I was 10, it had a humbucker in there, and I don't know if I switched it for our Aldridge humbucker. I think that's higher output. Right?
That's the hottest one.
So like, I like that if I'm going to play rock or like things like that. But then later, when I was getting into college, he got me one of our classic guitars with single coil pickups, more like vintage style setup, and I really fell in love with that. And I never really played with single coils in the bridge position much growing up. And then I had this guitar, and I was like, I actually really like this, you know, and I can really hear everything. And
Right.
And I especially got into more older music when I grew up. So I like having one for each.
Yeah.
Depending on what you're going to play.
Sure, cover what you're going to do. Yeah. One of the hallmarks of your guitars is that you're talking about that one, but also this one is the versatility, even with the dual humbucker setup here, of the 5-position switch.
Why not?
Yeah, there's a lot of tones that are available.
You know, there's also level. Some people say, "Oh, well, my humbucker is hotter than the single coils." Yeah, if you're doing this kind of setup, or when you go to the combo positions of this, you have to understand you're going to lose volume. So you can make it up with a nice compressor or something like that. You can balance it out. But I kind of almost look at it like channel switching. Well, I don't want my bridge pickup to have the same output as my neck pickup. You know what I mean? Because generally, you're usually soloing on the bridge pickup. So.
Use it for what you use it for.
Yeah.
Right. Now, but speaking of that, you have an innovation with your single coil pickups that helps to cut down on some of that traditional buzz and hum that you encounter.
The SSC system, which a lot of people don't even realize is there. It's a low impedance antenna, so this has been a common as a repair guy from the 80s. You know, it's the most common, that and fret buzz are the most common things you hear. You know, I've got noise from my pickups, 60 cycle, 50 cycle hum. So this system, what it does is it basically picks up hum but injects it low impedance into the other pickup. So it's not just like a dummy coil. I played around with dummy coils in the 80s, and they just rob all your tone. But, you know, so then you try stacks, and they're not quite right. You know, there's so many different ways to try and make a quiet pickup. This is the best way I think I've ever heard. It's really difficult to hear any difference. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I can hear a difference. I've sat in rooms, there was one NAMM show we went to, and with all the dropped AC and the way the floor was laid out, there was no hum. You know, you could take a single coil guitar and go, my God, it's like playing in a desert with a battery amp. There's just no hum.
Yeah.
Hum comes from something.
Right.
You know, it's like it's induced into the pickups. And so you can't really shield it away. You can shield out RF, but you can't shield out that induced hum because it's just being pushed into the coils. So this just kind of worked out like magic. It took us a while to play with it, but we built a Helmholtz coil so we could look at the hum from different pickups, and then built these coils that will cancel it out.
That's fascinating.
We also do a battery version, which is interesting because on something like a P90, you can't cancel out that hum passively. There's so much hum coming from a P90. It's just the way it's designed. So with that, we use a battery system, which does a similar thing, but the nice thing about it is if your battery dies, the hum comes back. It's not an active guitar, so it doesn't turn your guitar into low impedance.
Okay.
It's just there to boost the anti-hum that we're injecting.
The anti-hum. I like that. That's very cool.
It's a band name.
Yeah, right. Let's talk a little bit about the woods that you use. How do you source the woods? How do you choose? What makes a good wood for a guitar?
Well, there's no magic supplier of wood. You know, wood is not what Fender buys, what Gibson buys, what I buy. They all come from the same sources. So basically, you know, the number one thing we're looking for is a reasonable weight, which is getting more and more difficult as time goes on. And we're looking for dry wood. I don't want to have it sitting around for a year before I can use it. The tap tone has to be good of the wood. The stability. I mean, we have lifetime warranties on a lot of our products, so it's very important for me not to get a guitar back.
Sure.
So I care about that guitar through its whole life until it winds up getting dropped off a truck. So it's but the woods I think they have to connect. Like I said before, with a maple, for instance, if you've got a maple body, I wouldn't put a maple neck on there, and I wouldn't put in bright pickups. You're going to have to make adjustments. If you want a little sweet, you need some sour and some sugar and some.
Right, when you're making your sandwich,
make
sure you have just the right amount of mayo.
Well, yeah. No, that guy made roast beef slabs like 1/4 inch thick and gave it to the boss.
Wow.
And the boss said, "John, fire him." I felt really bad, but it wound up getting me out of the restaurant business.
Right.
I don't feel bad about it.
In fact, to this day, I want to try and find that guy. Carmen, if you're out there, give me a call sometime.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Now, you also have a full line of amplifiers as well. You mentioned the PT15, PT100. There's the Ombre. There's a variety of amplifiers. Tell us a little bit about the line and how that factors into what you do, the relationship you see between the guitars and the amps.
Well, for me, it was that thing where Bradshaw said, "Hey, buy this, buy this, buy this. You've got all the same shit as Lukather," and I'm like, okay, but it just didn't connect with me, and so it was just another passion because at that time I was doing a lot of repair work and a lot of building, like the Knopfler era, and I had at rehearsal space. I had a corner of the rehearsal space. And I would just go to rehearsal every night. Hey, the band would go, "Okay, we're going to take a 15-minute break." I'm like, "Okay, I got enough time to change that resistor." And then take out the amp, my soldering iron.
Crazy.
Oh no, when's the next break? But it just turned into a passion for myself. And then after I came out to LA and was working with Bob Bradshaw, then I stopped doing amplifiers and went to Fender. But then at Fender, they knew I did amplifiers as well, so I wound up making a bunch of these Tweed Twins for Eric Clapton that he used for many years. But it's amplifiers, electronics has always been a huge passion of mine. And I was into switching and Craig Anderton's book and all that stuff back in the 80s and 70s. So.
Yeah, right.
So we have different amplifiers. You start out with the 3+ preamp, which is the Bob Bradshaw thing. I did the custom audio thing, and then I designed the whole rack thing started to fade. And so I said, okay, I need to make an amplifier. So I did the OD100 with Bob Bradshaw, which was a fun thing. But funny enough, I designed that amp, laid out the PC boards. I do all my own PC boards. Laid out the PC boards and gave it to Bob. And I was hoping that Bob would just continue making them as I'm working for Fender and, kind of double dip a little bit. But he didn't make as many as I was hoping he was going to. But I designed everything and I never even heard it. And he just called me up and goes, "Yeah, we put one together. It worked great."
Wow.
I'm like, "Oh, any adjustments?" And he goes, "Nope."
Wow.
I was like, okay, so we continued down that path, and I also start to, as pedals, when I was growing up, drive pedals, and even though we technically had the capability of making these things sound great, they, back in the 80s, it was like, distortion plus, I don't know, it doesn't quite do that thing. Now you've got pedals that are so much more realistic when you plug them into a clean amp, and you can get, this sounds like a 3-channel amp. This sounds really good.
Sure.
So you've got the simplicity of the single-channel amps, and then we've got switching amps. We go a lot of different ways, and I'm really just trying to make everybody happy. It's like even when I would cook, I would look around the corner, and I would be really depressed if somebody didn't finish their food.
Right.
So I'm trying to please as many people as I can at the same time.
Right.
Personally, I play through 2 Bellas usually, or a PT15, or a PT100, or the SL68, or the Hedge. Actually, I love them all for different reasons.
Right. Right, and it's a little bit similar to the classic and modern guitars. You've got the much more classic amplifiers, and you've got the PT amps and things that are very technologically advanced as well.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is like a theme with us. We have the more vintage style for the people that want that stuff, or the thing with all the options that someone more into the advanced stuff will want. It's kind of like the PT15. We put the IR loader in there and a headphone amp, and the ability to swap your impulse responses with a USB cable. That's probably our most techie amp, but it's also, I think the theme too with us is that even though if we have those features, we try and incorporate the vintage analog circuitry so that you kind of get the best of both worlds.
Right. You still got you're coming back to that focus on the tone.
Yeah.
Ultimately, and then wrapping the other stuff around that.
Right.
I personally like amps on stage.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Me too.
just because I think I'm going to blame it on the PA systems in clubs. You know, when you have a silent stage, in my opinion, I go to see a great guitar player and he's got a silent stage. Okay, where's the soundboard? I'm gonna walk back there, you know, because that's where it sounds right.
Right.
Whereas when you got amps on stage, you can be up in the front and go, well, this is awesome. You know?
Right.
I'm used to seeing stacks of Marshalls on stage.
Yeah, right. Which is still a beautiful thing, but there's situations where you can't do that, and that's where something like VT15 certainly becomes a
absolutely.
great solution.
That was our solution, and then it's got our reactive load in it, which it truly mimics a true impedance curve of an amplifier, which I think is very important to the tone, as well as sometimes the safety of the amp.
Last thing I want to talk with you about is going back to Mark Knopfler and others as well, and now your current roster of amazing artists. We mentioned Andy Wood and Andre Neri and Scott Henderson and some of these people that have factored into what you do. Tell us a little bit about how you work with artists. For example, on a signature guitar, a signature pickup. You worked with Andy on his signature compressor, and there's a lot of back and forth there. What do the artists bring to what you do?
They bring what they want.
Yeah.
Like with Andy, he was like, I have this compressor I love, but it's really big and it sometimes breaks down. I have to buy multiple units, but they're not sold anymore, and I can't get any other compressor that sounds like this. And so we worked on trying to get that same style of compression, but in a much smaller form. He really pushed me to put it in a mini size pedal. I was like, I don't know if I can fit all that. Honestly, I'm looking at what it will take. We had like a charge pump in there to get a lot of headroom out of a 9-volt input. I think it's plus minus 15 in there, or at least 12. And I was like, I don't know if I can fit all this in the small unit. He's like, just try. So I really tried, and luckily I figured out a way. And then a little back and forth, you know, it's still missing this, and then it's okay. I'm gonna tweak this part, or redo part of it, send it back again. And I was like, okay, I think this is it. And then he's like, yeah, it's even better.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, yeah, they bring what they want. There's back and forth. I think we all work on the design. Him and I actually work on the aesthetic part of it too, the artwork and like what it's gonna look like. We render everything in CAD, and we get usually good renderings of what it's going to look like before we even build it, so we can send that back and forth with them. And we really work with the artist trying to get the design, at least from my experience with the electronic side of it, trying to get the design to look how we both like it, but especially how they want it to sound and what features they want it to have.
Right. Is it radically different with somebody like Mateus versus Andy versus Andre versus the artists that you work with? Is their approach radically different? How does it affect what you do on the guitar design side of it?
It's everybody is really different. You know, it's like somebody like Pete Thorn is extremely involved. Pete has amazing ears, and he knows exactly what he wants, and that to me is a lot of fun, because if I were to design every guitar by myself without input from the musician, I would be making everything sound the same, because each person tends to gravitate to what they want, and I don't really want to do that with everything. So Pete likes a little bit more brilliance, but he's got the stage experience, and I know from my experience that you can be sitting in a room and thinking what you want to hear out of your instrument or amplifier, and then you get on stage, it's an entirely different ball of wax. It's like the bass player's looking at you going like, turn on your bass, and the keyboard players, you're in my space,
Right.
So, you need a whole different thing, and Pete understands that so well. He's been very valuable to me from pickup design. Like, he can't stand a neck pickup that's woofy. It's got to still be clear. He goes, but he'll sit down there and explain, see, when you do this and this, and in the middle position, it's got to sound like early Led Zeppelin, So I've got guys like that, and then I've got guys that like, oh yeah, I really like this one. Could we have different dots? I want illuminated dots, or I want this fret size, and this is the neck shape I want. But they're usually pretty easy. But then again, I usually pick artists. People go, well, how do you pick your artists? I mean, well, now we've got an artist relations guy, Justin, but before that, it was really just like, do I like the way they play?
Yeah.
You know, and like Ian Thornley he's a monster guitar player, and Pete introduced me to him, and I'm like, yeah, we got to build this guy some guitars. This guy's amazing.
Right.
And Ian's become a great friend too. But all my artists, you know, Mateus is so brilliant. And Andy, you know, Andy's been with us forever, and he's just a ridiculously good guitar player. I just love my artists. You know, I'm grateful. Even if we don't sell a ton of guitars for one artist, they are monsters. You know, they're all monsters. So.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. Well, I am so excited that you guys are here. Guitar Fest is going to be a great time this weekend. Actually, I put you to work, and you tweaked the tweaked the neck.
Yeah, you're a little more humid out here, so I was like,
I've got a gig tonight, so I got to have this guitar playing right.
Yeah, and that's also something
tweak,
something like we were talking about. You know, I probably should do a little bit of a video explaining how to basically care for your instrument and keep it set up, because when you do like straight necks, it's very critical that you keep them in a certain range, because your range is lower than it would be if you had a huge amount of relief in the neck. You've got a lot of room to move. But if you're keeping that neck real straight, it can't go back bow at all, or it starts to ping out a little bit.
Right.
So these are things a musician should be able to tweak himself. And we try to make that easy, and that's the reason we moved to a headstock adjustment on our neck. So you can grab a wrench and in between, you know, your tech can tweak it, or you can tweak it.
Right. Yeah, well, I appreciate you tweaking this one for me.
Yeah, no problem. It's a great guitar.
It's going to be fun to take us out on the gig, so thank you very much. Great to see you guys.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming out. Glad you made it this time.
Yeah, thank you.
So happy to have you here. Hope you come back again soon.
Awesome.
And enjoy Guitar Fest.
All right, thank you.
Great to see you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here. I'm Mitch Gallagher from Sweetwater.